Hey, Colin. This is Jason Hobbs from Random Screed. Hey, man, it was kind of thrilling to hear you talk on your own show. I certainly hope it doesn't mean that we won't have you calling into the other OSR Anchorite shows, because those are always a sheer pleasure for certain, and your call-ins often give me stuff to talk about, so I really appreciate those. Either way, I think that you'll get better as you go. I am positive I have, and I really feel like a lot of the others have gotten better as they've gone as well. Glenn pretty much already did this thing on video, so he's an old hat, I suppose. But Tenkar definitely got better. James Spahn better. Matt better. Tim all got better, and I know you will too, man. So welcome, the official welcome, Colin. See you later.
Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. It's pretty crazy to think that call-in from Jason Hobbs comes from July 2018. We are almost in June 2024, and I've been podcasting for the better part of 6 years as an Anchorite. Well, we could split hairs over that. I guess I've been podcasting on Spotify technically for a few months, but I still feel like an Anchorite. However, that is all about to cease, as Anchor is going to be no more. And to mark the occasion, as this is likely to be my last episode before it all changes for good, I've sprinkled some old messages from back in the day, kind of a beginning, a middle and an end. And Jason, at the beginning, as we heard, welcoming me to the community. And this is something we always did as Anchorites. We left call-ins to welcome new casters, and it's been carried on. I haven't got involved with it so much myself of late. That's been taken up by others, newer podcasters finding their footing, and old hands like Mr. Connnerly, who we'll hear from later. But it was always a nice thing to do. And I guess this could still happen, although we will have to see. So Jason was my inspiration for starting a podcast. I'd listened to him on Hobbs and Friends, heard he had an Anchor podcast, and it kind of piqued my interest, and it seemed so easy, and I was intrigued. I looked into it, and well, the rest, as they say, is history.
Hey Colin, it's Barry here from A Song of Dice and Shadows. Just calling in after listening to your episode on mechanisms. As you know, I've been looking into Year Zero engine as well, keep seeing each other on the Discords. One thing I wanted to raise was about Dragonbane as a game. Because it's a weird tangent, but because I've been learning Swedish and I've got a Swedish friend who plays GURPS, and I've been looking into, because he used to play Drakarok Demoner, the game it's based on, back in the day. I've sort of been looking at some of the older editions of Dragonbane, and it did start off, well, Drakarok Demoner as it technically was, it did start off as a RuneQuest game, so it was D percentile, as RuneQuest is based on BRP, but the Free League version is actually somewhat different. It's kind of based on a 90s version that came out of Drakarok Demoner, and also quite a lot of Free League stuff that's kind of in there. So the initiative system, for example, is very much a Free League thing. I think it was Gabe on Analytic Dice that mentioned he didn't like it because it was a Free League addition to it. One of the things I've noticed, like you said, with the Free League stuff is that quite a lot of the Free League games use this card-based initiative, which is how it works in Dragonbane, where you've got like 10 cards and you draw them, and that's your position. And they vary in that it was some, and I can't remember which because my memory is bad these days, but in some systems, you're stuck with that card then for the entire combat, and other ones you draw each turn. And so yeah, in some cases there are abilities where you can swap cards with other players, and it's quite cool that you can take someone else's card and swap it with yours, so either go earlier or later in a round. So yeah, there's quite fun strategy stuff, and I agree with you on that one. There is some like cool tactical play, and like you kind of said, I like the G in game as well. So I like some of that stuff sometimes. There's some cool things you can do with the game mechanisms if it lets you kind of do that cool stuff for your players, and it feels to me quite a fun aspect of the game. So yeah, that's the main thing I want to jump in there and say. And anyway, fun listening to your show again. Take care, and I shall speak to you soon.
Well, it was lovely to hear from Barry again. It's been Many a moon passed since he's called into the show, and a very useful call in too, laying down some Dragonbane lore, stuff that's clearly gone into my head at some point, because I do recall this information now that he says it, but for that to stick around in my brain, I would have had to revisit it quite a few times for it to get lodged in. I knew I'd heard something about RuneQuest, and I knew I'd heard something about BRP, but the order in which all that happened and Swedish names of games, no, that is not Spike Pit. However, it is panning out to be a bit of a Scandinavian-themed year. I'm going out on my travels. It looks like I'm going to end up going to Norway, Sweden and Denmark, all in the same year. And weirdly enough, this is totally unplanned, but I seem to be playing loads of free league games, as I've said before. What follows next is my thoughts on a play of Mutant Year Zero. We've got Genlab Alpha to the table, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I did too. So folks, I just wanted to grab a minute to jump on the mic and talk about a recent session running the Year Zero engine, Mutant Year Zero, Genlab Alpha to be precise. We were a player down, and I've run this session, I've run this game system now a couple of times. I've run it 1-to-1 with my son. I've run it with 2 players. We've had a session 0. Quite a bit of character generation in the session 0 and either side of it. And in this session, I still haven't managed to get all 3 players at the table, because it's being used as a sort of a filler when we're a person down. And it's giving me a nice kind of casual on-ramp. We can play quite sedately, a little bit less pressure, iron out a few rules and everything like that. And I've never really done this before, and that's working out pretty well. There's a lot of newness to the way we're running this game. And I like to do that. When I run a new system, I like to ring the changes. One of the things I thought, you know what, we're a little bit lackadaisical with our character sheets and updating them and keeping things all orderly. And I was listening to various folk talking about the 4D way of doing things. And I've got mixed feelings about the whole subject, but generally kind of 4D curious, we could say. And one aspect that Same Old G was talking about was this rules as written thing. And when I start a new system, I like to go rules as written and try and play things by the book. And one of the things in there is the way that when you generate characters, everybody has kind of a couple of sentences describing their sort of thoughts or their relationship with the other PCs. Now, we've got a stable of about 9 or 10 characters, and that takes a little bit of figuring out. So we took this opportunity to flesh out some of those ideas. This has also got it's a game that uses the concept of kind of like your dream idea. I forget what it's called. Something dream. Is it your dream idea? Or anyway, it's like a long-term goal, and that's tied into your character progression. And you ask questions at the end of a session. Have you done this? Have you done that? Have you progressed your goals? Blah, blah, blah. So it's an important mechanism in the game. And we had sort of glossed over this, you know, in the way we typically knock up 5th edition characters and the backgrounds fall a little bit by the wayside. The description of the character falls a little bit by the wayside. And we've, over the years, just got a little bit slack with some of that stuff. The equipment list. This uses slots, so I feel it's a bit more important to get that right. And for various reasons, anyway, I'd said to the guys, let's have a little tighten up with the character sheets. I feel we're not making full use of the character sheets and how they integrate with the rules. And that was fine. Everybody was cool with that. We tidied them up. It took a little while. And then I also said, there's this kind of procedure for a typical session. Why don't we look at that and kind of just work through that systematically, go through everything with a kind of a diligent approach as we went along, where we had ideas and felt that, you know, there were things that we could do with to improve play, such as perhaps we could put the animal powers onto cards and create little artifact cards, and could we copy some of the tables out of the book and put them together to make like a player reference, or kind of a cheat sheet. We noted all that stuff down on a scrap of paper and going to implement that in future. Not something I'd ever recall doing recently, probably just because we're playing the same old games. We just crank out our episodes of 5th edition and sessions of 5th edition. Then we got to something else new, which is the strategic turn. And this ties into something I'm quite fascinated with. It's a kind of faction play, almost a mini game within a game. Not something we've tried before. And what it is, the GM plays the Watchers in Genlab Alpha, and the Watchers are kind of like the all-seeing overseer, if you like, the kind of the feds. The players are members of a resistance movement directly opposed to the Watchers. The Watchers ensure that all the denizens of Paradise or Paradise Valley are kept within the confines of the valley. They maintain the fences, they organise patrols and raids, and they abduct characters, they have roadblocks, checkpoints, all this type of stuff. And the GM has a number of points to conduct these operations. The players there's 9 locations. They're different territories for the different types of creatures, be they the bears, the rats, the dogs, the cats, the reptiles, the badgers, the rabbits. I think I've covered them all. Oh, and the apes. So what you do is secretly the GM uses his resources to plot a number of operations in the listed locations that I just mentioned, and simultaneously the players in private, they discuss how they are going to use their resources. Now their resources are cells in the resistance, and they start off with 2 sympathetic cells and themselves. The kind of hub of the resistance is the PC group with a number of other NPCs. You got around a dozen characters forming that. The other cells are 4 or 5 unnamed. They don't have to be unnamed, but they are, at the start of the game, they are unnamed NPCs forming a cell. So they are the reptile cell and the badger cell? Yeah, the badger cell. Each of the settlements has an insurgency rating and a population. And for every 50 population, you can sustain up to 1 cell. Typically, the groups have got around 100, 150, up to about 300, and that's the most populous is the rabbits. Insurgency wise, the rabbits are the most kind of militant and insurgent, with resistance kind of being the norm at the start of play, and the least insurgent groups are the dogs, who are treated with suspicion as being too close for comfort in terms of their relationship with the Watchers, and the bears and badgers that are fairly low in terms of insurgency, but they've got quite a low population. So what everybody's doing is they're looking at the numbers. Now you have to kind of you get a bonus. You have a chance of success and a danger level, and there's a chart with categories of sort of set operations. There's 9 different types of operations you can do as the resistance, each of them having a different effect. It might reduce the resources of the Watchers, it might increase insurgency, it might what else does it do? Oh yeah, kind of like you recruit a cell, various different things, and they're really thematic, and you get bonuses to your chance of success for additional numbers of cells. So you can assign 1, 2, 3, multiple cells to an operation, but you can only ever do one operation in any one territory. And if you have cells acting outside of their own territory, if they go to a neighbouring territory, they get 1 less success because it's not there. 1 less chance of success, and this is a die, 1 less die for neighbours. And if they go to a non-neighbouring group, so even further afield, they get a -2 die penalty on their chance of success. They get a bonus to their chance of success depending on the insurgency level. And so it's all about picking where your best chances are and weighing up risk versus reward. For danger, in terms of danger, for every danger die you roll, there's a 1 in 6 chance, if you roll a 1, that you will lose that cell. Your mission could still succeed if you make the success roll, but in terms of casualties, you roll a 1 on any of the danger die and you will lose a cell in that operation. Additionally, because the Watchers, the GM in fact, is planning out an opposition, he is trying to anticipate where the resistance are going to go. Well, they're each trying to anticipate where their opponent's going to go. And then if you have, say, an operation from each side happens to coincide in the same location, the dice cancel out. You cancel out dice, so on a 1-for-1 basis. Now, the Watcher's missions are always effective. The Watcher doesn't roll, he just merely has to turn up. He puts his resources in, and turns up, but it's more random for the PCs. And then the PC's actual cell themselves, that is played out as an RPG session. So whatever they do, that becomes the kind of the operation that you role play out, and it drives the campaign along. We played out 1 turn. 1 turn represents approximately a month. So we started out with the Watchers going in quite heavy. They did 2 raids, 2 patrols, and an abduction. They abducted from the bears. They did a patrol to the, I want to say, the apes and the badgers, and then a couple of raids, maybe the rabbits and somebody else. Can't remember. It's not too important. So what I'll do in future is, at the end of a session, I will have my plans as a GM all laid out on the GM, what is it, the Watcher sheet, and then the players will discuss. Well, we'll have a debrief on the session, and then we will discuss what they want to do in terms of their strategic move. But we won't make the rolls, we won't resolve it there and then. What I'll use to resolve it would be the next session. We'll use time in the next session to resolve it and kind of weave it into a bit of narrative play. And it seems like the players are quite keen to work a bit of role playing into all of that. We can discuss what the results are, what that looks like in terms of telling a tale, and then we can also play out the PC's operation. So I'm looking forward to how this unfolds, and it's good to try out kind of a different style of play and get into some factions, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I was in fact talking about this not so long ago with Carl Rodriguez of the GMologist, because I still got fond memories of the faction play in his Orcs of Far campaign. we were in a big city, and we were getting quite we were getting quite a bit of influence and resources building up in the city that campaign kind of ended up centering around.
Hi, Colin. This is Ben from Questing Beast. I thought I would just call in to clear up a little misconception I hear going around that on the Google Plus post that I did a little while back, I was referring to the OSR Anchorite group or this whole network of podcasts, which I wasn't. I didn't actually know that this group existed or that all of these podcasts existed until just a couple days ago. I was mostly referring to the mainstream D&D and RPG podcasts out there that I listen to regularly, which don't have the kind of content that I really enjoy, and I've been kind of moving away from them. But I think it's amazing that you guys have this community of podcasts and that you're all calling into each other and collaborating. I think it's amazing. And keep on doing what you're doing, guys. If you have any questions about Knave or Maze Rats, I am totally happy to answer them as well. Thanks for doing these reviews of my games and talking about them. I really appreciate getting the feedback. Anyway, cheers. Talk to you later.
Now, I can't remember quite what prompted that call in from the Questing Beast, Ben Milton. But I do remember that when we got that call in, there was a lot of activity on G+. I think I was around about 150, 200 episodes into my podcast. I was calling in all the different podcasters, calling into all the shows, leaving messages. The audio dungeon was in full swing, and every time someone new joined, we were all at pains to welcome them in and involve them in the conversation. A lot of folks I was gaming with were podcasters as well. I was in loads of different actual plays, loads of online gaming, really close and immersed in the Anchorite community. And this business with Ben cropped up because he was quite dismissive of RPG podcasts, and we in the audio dungeon kind of, I don't know, we talked amongst ourselves and got ourselves a little bit riled up. I think at the time feathers were ruffled, and maybe some of our number that were on G+ had responded, pointed out a few of the different casts. At the time I was doing reviews and talking about Ben's games, Maze Rats quite a lot, for example. But I don't really know what prompted him to call in to me in particular. I feel like there was quite a lot of us at the time that he could have responded to, and I don't really remember who was involved in the conversation. But perhaps, because I was always talking about Maze Rats, I'd reviewed his products, and I've always had a soft spot for Maze Rats, and I spoke highly of it. I'm not sure, but I was very chuffed and welcomed the call, and it was nice to know that he wasn't referring to us, the Anchorites. It was more a bit of criticism levelled at the bigger players. So yeah, a bit of a high point in terms of callers. I don't think I'd had before or since anybody with that kind of level of industry sort of presence or social media clout. I don't know what you'd want to call it, but I guess I was a little bit starstruck, really. Oh, we are in a very much a niche of a niche, it would seem, but it does remind me of how close-knit a community the Anchorites got to be over time.
Hey Colin, Frank T here. Yeah, I'm still around. Just trying to catch up with some work and family stuff, and then I'll be getting back into the whole Anchorcast routine again. Hey, listen, you call in to whoever you want to call into. I love hearing your call-ins, and, I think there is some therapy in that. On the other side, I like listening to see what people say about my call-ins, and I love hearing what you have to say. The glue that holds the OSR anchor together.
And that's a real blast from the past. My old buddy Frank T. We recorded several episodes together over the years and thoroughly enjoyed recording with Frank. Really talented guy, and I wish he still did his podcast, but I think people run out of things to say. The joy of Anchor, like Frank says, there was this business of call-ins, to-ing and fro-ing, and that has all been made much more difficult of late. I don't get to listen to casts as much as I used to, but I do try and get my call-ins because I know how much it means to the host, and it is inspiring. And I think people, like Frank says, they like to hear your response, and I try to give people justice with my messages. But at times, I don't think I've always done perhaps as well as I could have. I haven't been called the glue of the Anchorites for many a moon now. That role has been adopted by my old buddy and the next caller, the man himself, Mr. Jason Connnerly. I believe soon to return to the mic after a little sojourn away from it, and I do believe I put a little wager on the fact that he would return. Scheduled for June, we'll see what happens, and we also know June is the big change. So I'm going to close this episode out now and leave it with our man, Mr. Connnerly, to have the final word.
Hey, Colin, Jason here. Just want to say thank you for the kind words on your show. I want to thank Anthony for calling in about FFG's Star Wars and your mechanism segment. I hope other people call in about that. I think Anthony had some great points with the initiative system there. I have not played any of those Genesis kind of based games, but they do sound really cool every time you hear about them. As far as my show, well, I don't think I'd remove the feed from your podcatcher link quite yet. Take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon.
And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to Old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.